In the news tonight, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signed two accords in the areas of energy and finance during Abbas's visit to Caracas. The death toll in Turkey's worst industrial disaster rises to 301 after rescue workers find the bodies of two more miners, and the disaster triggers angry protests across the country. And West African leaders agreed to work together to wage total war on Boko Haram, saying the Nigerian Islamist group threatens all of the African region. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Prime Minister Abdallah Mansour met with member of the Canadian House of Commons and the Canadian Liberal Party, Marc Garneau, on a visit to Jordan within a regional tour. Talks dealt with developments in the region, mainly the Palestinian issue and the crisis in Syria. Mansour said conflicts and instability in the region are the result of failure to reach a solution to the Palestinian issue. A just and permanent solution to the Palestinian problem would lead to restoring a sense of security and stability in the region and address all other regional challenges, Mansour added. He reiterated Jordan's support of efforts, namely those by the U.S. Secretary of State, to reach a comprehensive solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. The meeting also reviewed the repercussions of the crisis in Syria on Jordan and the need for the international community to provide support. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signed two accords in the area of energy and finance during Abbas's visit to Caracas. Under the energy deal, Venezuela will provide 240,000 barrels of crude diesel to Palestine over the next 5 years at preferential prices. The Venezuelan president heralded the deal as the birth of Petro-Palestine. The agreements were reached following talks between the two leaders on the peace process as well as on Palestinian relations with Latin America. Abbas is seeking to garner support for granting Palestine observer status in 3 Latin American organizations. Maduro said he is ready to support the inclusion of Palestine as an observer in several organizations of the South American countries.
Thank you, Venezuela, for supporting Palestine. Thank you, Venezuela, for helping to break the monopoly that Israel has over our economy. Thank you, Venezuela, for responding to our needs. Thank you, Venezuela, for being available to continue to lend the Palestinian people more support in their fight.
This is a contract to supply concrete, and this agreement is from Venezuela to Palestine for the diesel that Palestine needs to keep its economy growing and consolidating. Petro-Palestine is born, and it is the alliance between Venezuela and Palestine.
Over to the Syria crisis, where heavy fighting between government forces and rebels was reported in rural Damascus, according to footage posted to a social media website. Despite the fighting, preparations for a presidential election next month is underway. Official Syrian media says it is giving equal opportunities to all candidates who have begun campaigning to run against President Bashar al-Assad. One of the two challengers, Bassam al-Nouri, in an interview with Reuters, praised Assad's military campaign against Islamist rebels, but said Syria must do more to maintain ties with the West. He said there is no difference between the three candidates over the military strategy against Syrian rebels in the ongoing conflict. In France, meanwhile, 7 men suspected of fighting in Syria have been placed under formal investigation following their arrest in Strasbourg. A judicial official said the men in their early 20s are suspected of traveling to Syria late last year to join the uprising and are under investigation for criminal conspiracy in relation with a terrorist undertaking. France estimates around 280 of its citizens are currently fighting in Syria among the rebels' ranks. Last month, the French government launched a plan to prevent its citizens joining the civil war and becoming a threat to their home country. Under the new policies, French nationals who return from Syria could face charges of being part of a terrorist organization, while minors could be prevented from leaving France without parental consent. Across Europe, governments estimate several thousand of their citizens have gone to Syria since the war began 3 years ago and are worried about the security risk posed by youths radicalized by the conflict. The death toll in Turkey's worst industrial disaster rose to 301 after rescue workers found the bodies of 2 more miners. Rescue teams began winding up their operations today, 4 days after an initial fire sent deadly carbon monoxide through a mine in Soma. The disaster triggered angry protests across Turkey aimed at mine owners and at Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's government. Here's more.
The mine disaster in the Turkish town of Soma has unleashed a wave of anger across the nation. Police fired water cannon and rubber bullets to break up this demonstration in Soma itself. By Saturday, 292 people were confirmed dead. Search teams are looking for 10 still missing after fire flooded the mine with carbon monoxide in minutes on Tuesday. The national anger is directed partly at mine owners accused of putting profit over safety, but it's also aimed at the government of Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan, regarded as too cosy with industry tycoons and lax on enforcing regulations. The disaster's turning into a political crisis for Erdogan. Footage emerged of him apparently slapping a man as residents jeered and jostled his entourage when he visited Soma earlier this week. The man said Erdogan had slapped him and told Kanal D TV he was then beaten by the Prime Minister's bodyguards. Erdogan's party says there's no visual evidence to support the allegation. Anger's been further intensified by a photograph of an Erdogan aide kicking a protester held down by police special forces.
In Libya, the death toll from the Benghazi clashes has risen to 43, with more than 100 people wounded. Violence broke out yesterday between irregular Islamist militants and the military forces of the self-declared Libyan National Army, led by retired General Khalifa Haftar. They shelled bases belonging to Ansar al-Sharia and another Islamist group in Benghazi. Military aircraft and helicopters fighting for Haftar were also reported flying over Benghazi. The violence prompted the Libyan Prime Minister to order the regular army to control any armed groups, including Haftar's forces. Authorities closed the city's Benina airport in the evening because of the clashes. The second round of Ukrainian talks opened today in the eastern city of Kharkiv with a plea for separatists to hand over their weapons. The talks are taking place under the auspices of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk repeated that the government would not negotiate with gunmen, saying those who kill with guns don't want peace for Ukraine. For more than a month, armed men have occupied government, police and security service buildings in eastern Ukraine, and last week they held a referendum seeking to cut ties to Ukraine. OSCE negotiator Wolfgang Ischinger appealed to separatists barricaded in administrative buildings in Donetsk and Luhansk to enter the dialogue. On behalf of the OSCE and the international community, he said he is appealing to Ukrainians to use words and not swords. And just hours before the peace talks began, pro-Russian separatist leader Valery Bolotov was detained by Ukrainian border guards, then freed by armed supporters in a firefight at a checkpoint. Bolotov, the self-proclaimed governor of Ukraine's eastern Luhansk region, was detained at the checkpoint as he returned from treatment in Russia for wounds he suffered in an attack on Tuesday. About 200 armed separatists went to the checkpoint and demanded his release. West African leaders meeting at a summit in Paris endorsed a plan to improve cooperation in their fight against the Nigerian Islamic militant group Boko Haram that has kidnapped more than 200 Nigerian schoolgirls and threatens to destabilize the wider region. French President François Hollande has said Boko Haram is now a threat to West and Central Africa and is linked to other militants, including Al-Qaeda's North African arm. He urged for an immediate comprehensive plan to exchange information, coordinate action and protect borders. Along with the French president and the leaders of Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, Niger and Benin, the meeting was attended by US, British and European Union representatives. Boko Haram has killed more than 3,000 people in a 5-year campaign to establish an Islamic State in mostly Muslim northeast Nigeria. The leaders held a joint news conference following the talks.
Voilà le message que nous voulons envoyer.
The message we want to send is that we know the threat. It is serious. It is serious for the region, for Africa, and so for Europe. We have deployed our military and intelligence system to find these young girls.
Boko Haram is no longer the local terror group with some religious sentiment that started in Nigeria in 2002 to 2009. In fact, from 2000 to 2004, from 2009 to date, it has changed and is operating clearly as an Al-Qaeda organization, can better be described as Al-Qaeda in West and Central Africa. It's no longer the Boko Haram that came with the sentiment that Western education is prohibited and that women must not go to school.
And over to the Balkans, hit by the worst floods in over a century that claimed the lives of at least 30 people. Emergency services pulled 7 dead bodies from flooded homes in Bosnia today, and soldiers rushed to free an estimated 700 people stranded in a school in Serbia. The water level is estimated at 2 to 3 meters in some areas of the Serbian capital Belgrade, worst hit by days of heavy rainfall. To the west, thousands of volunteers joined soldiers, police and firefighters overnight in building sandbag flood defenses around the town of Sabac, threatened by the rising waters of the river Sava. In Serbia, by late yesterday, 3 people had drowned and over 90,000 homes were without electricity, with the country's energy system near breaking point. And in Bosnia, the death toll reached 11, with the discovery today of 6 bodies in the eastern town of Doboj. A massive Sphinx-like statue is the centerpiece at the abandoned space of the Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn, New York, before the building is demolished. Called a subtlety or the marvelous sugar baby, the figure measures 23 meters in length, 10.82 meters in height, and 8 meters in width. It is made of a styrofoam and is covered with about 40 tons of sugar. The artist, Kara Walker, said she thought about the Sphinx as an emissary from the past to speak about the factory, a kind of relic of America's industrial past. The figure is on view at the Domino Sugar Factory until July 6th. British celebrity chef Jamie Oliver wants access to food education for children to become a priority for governments and food industry stakeholders around the world. At the launch of this year's Food Revolution Day, Oliver joined school children and teachers in London to engage in some fun cooking activities. Now in its 3rd year, Food Revolution Day aims at promoting healthy eating around the globe and wants to reduce diet-related illnesses by educating children about the importance of a healthy diet. According to the campaign's website, the current generation of children is likely to die at a younger age than their parents because of poor diets. Experts blame changes in family life, the rise of convenience foods, and a lack of food education in schools.
We're focusing primarily on it being a human right that every child in every country has access to food education as a right. Because the biggest killer in the world is diet-related disease. So I think the time of talking in statistics and measurement, bored of it, fed up with it, we're all fed up with it. Now is the time for action and brave prime ministers and politicians and brave CEOs of food companies and supermarkets to get more personally committed to educating people about food.
Atletico Madrid were crowned La Liga champions. In a thrilling climax to the La Liga campaign, Atletico came from behind to draw 1-1 at the Nou Camp and secure their first La Liga title in 18 years. Alexis Sanchez opened the scoring for Barca in the first half, but in the second half of the match, Atletico's Diego Godin equalized. The result meant Atletico finished on 90 points, with Barca second on 87. Singapore businessman Peter Lim is the new owner of debt-ridden La Liga side Valencia after buying 70.4% of the shares owned by the club's foundation. The president of the Valencia Foundation announced that Lim will invest 60 million euros this summer in new signings. He will also invest an additional 100 million euros for his shares and will also make the commitment of having the new stadium finished by 2019 in time to mark Valencia's centennial celebrations. Valencia are reportedly 300 million euros in debt. In tennis, on the Italian Open, Novak Djokovic beat Canadian Milos Raonic to reach the finals of the tournament. Though the Serb was subjected to an onslaught of power by Raonic, he eventually got the upper hand. With a 6-7, 7-6, 6-3 victory, Djokovic booked a final against either top seed Rafael Nadal or Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov. And finally, fair weather continues tonight with partly cloudy skies and northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperature is expected, but it remains warm across the country. Winds will be northwesterly moderate to brisk, blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively hot conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, his reminder of the day's top stories. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro signed 2 accords in the areas of energy and finance during Abbas's visit to Caracas. The death toll in Turkey's worst industrial disaster rises to 301 after rescue workers find the bodies of 2 more miners, and the disaster triggers angry protests across the country. And West African leaders agreed to work together to wage total war on Boko Haram, saying the Nigerian Islamist group threatens all of the African region. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.